got one more section to go through. So I stand between you and the end of your day.
Yes.
So we're all talking.
All right.
Don't talk too much.
Well, we need to have talking because talking helps us get to where we need to go, right?
It's okay. I'm gonna eat this one. Thanks.
Do you need more candy? Are you running out of candy?
You want a gummy?
I'll take it.
There's some lunch, there's all kinds of stuff.
Snacks don't ever really make it quite.
There's a candy bar right there. Get you a
They
candy
don't,
bar.
do they?
No. Which I shouldn't complain, but we've been sitting there for a while.
That was pretty good. I have to admit, that was pretty good.
What do you think?
I passed some down.
Oh, because we got him here.
Well, let me know that one.
Yeah.
That's a good leader.
He was getting the bad pieces out.
That's what
We
it
wanted to
was.
make sure that you guys at the end of the table have less chances of getting the food, so you can't use that as a complaint later on for not passing.
Exactly.
I just did it
Oh.
last month.
That's
Good.
exactly it.
I got a year.
He's helping you.
Fit the fight, fit the fight.
We knew there was a method to your madness. Okay, so, standards. Let's talk about standards. So we've talked about all kinds of stuff today. All kinds of leadership, traits, management, self-development, people development, everything under the countryside, right? So, when I say standards, in context of everything else we've talked about today, what do I mean by standards? What are standards?
Guidelines.
It's like a bar. It's like compared to where you are, where you want to be, where you don't need to be.
Okay? Standards. What do other people think of when I say standards? What are standards?
Something you have to meet.
Yeah, the expectations. Like
Expectations.
where they expect you to be.
So that bar, something that you have to meet. Why are they important?
Again, it's that you have to set some parameters.
You can't have people doing just whatever they want to do.
Okay?
Yeah.
You gotta set something in place or what happens? Okay, so what did you say?
So it's a constant goal
Constant goal,
that you can normally set, so a specific standard you have to meet.
okay?
That's what professional person is doing.
Okay? So when you communicate your standards, are they reasonable? Are they kind of sort of when you think about SMART, back to the SMART goals, are they achievable? Are you communicating standards that people can actually achieve? Are they consistent? Those are three pretty important things. Why are those important? Achievable, reasonable, consistent. Why do you want standards to be those
So you
three
have
things?
something to say. You don't want
Across
something
the board
that's
for
not
everyone.
achievable. Yeah, you want something that's not achievable to be a standard.
Okay, do those standards ever change? Okay, why should they change?
Yeah.
Higher as you get better.
And it's according to your goals. You may not reach your goal the first time, so you readjust and you might have to lower your standards a little bit. But being very realistic about
Different
it.
standards for different individuals.
You might have different ones. They might have to vary a little bit.
This one time I worked at this warehouse and we would have to go pick orders and load the truck and stuff. And at the beginning of the day, they would hand us this packet of orders that has to be done. And each person gets an equal number of packages, but it was just so much. And I was just a temp there. I work for a staffing service, you know. So the guys that were there, they're just cruising around, picking the orders. I might run around like a chicken with my head cut out trying to get these orders done. But that's what they told me had to be done. You know, I was skimming lunches and everything trying to get these done. Then the day I still wouldn't get them done. And so the guys that are there permanently were telling me, dude, if you do that, and then they're going to think that it's possible to do this. It's not possible to go through all this stuff. You know, and they say if they realize that nobody's finishing those goals, they're going to adjust them, you know.
Okay, so maybe those are not realistic, but in terms of our airmen, so if I've got Airman Snuffy, And Airman Snuffy is 3 months out of tech school. What are my standards for him?
Not very high.
What do you want him to do?
Like,
Come to
it's
work.
Not high, but achievable.
Show up.
You want to
Not
go
high, but
confident.
achievable.
Yeah.
Okay, why?
You wanna get them
You
trained.
feel
You don't
self-worth.
want to discourage them.
Don't want to discourage him. Want him to have some self-worth, some self-esteem. What did you guys say over here?
Basic tasks.
Okay,
Stuff that
basic.
anybody can learn and accomplish.
Should start like your 5-0 training, stuff like that. You give them
That's the most
Okay.
important.
So a lot of your upgrade training kind of stuff. You're going to set that bar. You're going to make sure it's reasonable, because if we don't, we get them disillusioned, and then we might lose them. Now they've been doing the job for a year and a half. What are those standards the same?
No.
What's different? Why is it different?
Because
We
those
got
should be
experience.
accomplished.
More experience. They're more accomplished. You should be expecting more out of them. They should be able to do more in this time period. Okay? Really, really important. If standards aren't set, what kind of results are you going to get?
Medical.
Minimal, low,
Mediocre.
mediocre? You might get some great ones, right?
Yeah,
You
I'm
could
like-
get great
I
ones.
think it'll be like all over the place, cause
You want
nobody
to
really
have
knows
someone
what-
who reaches for the stars. He has his own standards.
But we don't have consistency. We don't have consistency going on. What is one of the most important things you can do when setting standards?
Yeah, be fair across the board.
Make them achievable, make them fair across the board. How do we do that?
Consistency.
Consistency. How do I know?
Hold everybody to the same standard.
Like we were talking earlier.
Okay, you need to know your people. Do you need to clearly communicate?
Yes.
Okay, you might have some really great standards, Sergeant Johnson. I can't meet them because I have no clue what they are. You know what they are. I don't have a clue. How am I going to meet them?
And with that, should they be consistent with other people since everybody is on a different level?
I don't know. What do you
So,
guys
like,
think?
like, you could have higher standards for other people because they achieve stuff a whole lot faster, and somebody that's not a fast learner have the standard a little bit lower for them. So it wouldn't be consistent all the way across the board.
Okay, what do you guys think?
Like, with standards, like, I'm the same with expectations, because because you might be expecting one thing, but a standard is what, it's just standard should be the same across the board. I expect you, to do your job, the best of your ability, I expect this done a certain amount of time. Or then you can have different expectations depending on someone's rank. I want all my staff to behave this way. There should be a standard, but there's not a, but your expectations might be different for each different person. Like, Aaron Snuffy's a really good worker. I expect a lot out of him because I can depend on him, but my standard's not gonna change just because he's good. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Any other thoughts on that?
I agree. I think the standard should be same across the board. Regardless of if he might be a harder worker than she is, she may or may not be at this hard. I mean, it should be the same across the board. If I'm going to expect him to show up at a certain time and do a certain job, I'm going to expect everybody I supervise to show up at a certain time and do that same job.
Okay? So there are some things that standard, maybe everybody's going to be to work on time and that sort of thing. Your expectations may be a little different. So when you assign a duty or a task, what are your expectations of your subordinates? She brought up expectations. What are they? What do you expect out of them? Okay? And we know that because we know our people? Okay? What are the expectations?
I expect that if you have any issues or you bring them up in a timely manner so we can try to get it to help you get it done or whatever, or something you don't understand, you can need to bring that up to me in a timely manner so we can get it taken care of. I expect you to be able to communicate that with me.
Okay. Okay, good. So our standard is here. The CFETP says that you're going to train this task to the 3C level, meaning I can go out there and get the job done. I'm not an expert, but I can go out there and I can physically do the job pretty darn well as a journeyman, as a 5-skill level. Okay, that's the standard. My expectation of the guy out of tech school 3 months might be, I want you to get like 50% there in the next couple of months. But my guy a year and a half out that signed off, I expect him to be able to do it and knock it out of the park consistently, right? So we might have a little bit of a difference on how we look at standards versus expectations. And you may have in some cases where you might have a standard that you have for your 3-level airmen, and you might have a standard that you have for your 5-level. You may have groupings of those. So always think about that in terms of that. But when you think expectations, you're thinking level of expertise. What do they know? Where are they at? And how are you going to communicate those expectations? Okay? Do we have specific timelines we should have set when you're thinking expectations?
Yes.
Okay, so what are some examples of timelines within expectations?
I think you expect somebody to finish their CDCs within a 6-month period.
Okay, depending on how many volumes they have or sets, you may have situations where you say this is a clearly defined, because what happens when you go over a certain number of months? Okay?
Then you gotta start problems.
Sure, because in the whole CDC world, you got 12 months to do that set, and with an extension you get another 4. What happens when those expire? You're done, you're out of that career field. So you set yourself up for failure and that sort of thing. So that's an important piece of that. Okay, so when somebody is failing to meet those standards or failing to meet your expectations, how do you fix that?
First, you address it.
They gotta go.
They gotta go.
You have to sit down and just, let them know.
I mean, if they don't necessarily realize that they're not meeting your expectations, you have to at least let them know.
Okay? Is that fair?
Your EPR shouldn't be like the first time you notice.
Surprise!
I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Like that's not the time.
That's a great point. That's an absolutely great point, because in the reserve it's 2 years, and we're about to have senior airmen start getting them, by the way. If you guys haven't heard that by now.
Yeah.
So you've got to reach back.
Is it only senior?
Senior
It's,
envelope.
well, it's not only
Yeah.
senior airmen, but it's based on how many months in service they already have. So you may have some airmen, first class. You're probably not going to have any airmen that fall into it, but you may have some A1Cs that didn't come in with any stripes that may fall into it. But you have to reach back 2 years. With that static closeout date where it is, you're reaching back before they even started keeping track. So that might be kind of a painful process if you've not been doing your feedbacks and your ACAs and all of those sort of things. Okay? And so I just put this up here so that you guys could see this. We've already talked about it. Standards, discussing clear ones, expect results. Okay? So we're going to talk now, we're talking now about constructive feedback. I had a commander when I was on active duty. And active duty, those of y'all, how many of y'all have been active duty before you were in reserve? Okay, so pretty much almost everyone in the room. So you had 1 year, right? 1 year between EPRs. And I had a commander when I was the training manager in the squadron who said, if anybody comes to me and says they're surprised by their EPR, which was an APR back in those days, and it was a 9, not a 5, and we don't need to get into why that changed, but we didn't fix the problem with the 5. So she said, if anybody walks in the door and says to me, I had no idea I was getting a 5 on my APR, she wanted to see that supervisor, because there was no excuse for somebody being surprised by an APR. So to your point, there's no excuse, right? Are you doing your feedbacks? Are you doing your ACAs? Are you doing the proper things and setting those standards? So that's pretty darn important stuff. So when you give constructive feedback, how do you do it? What is it all about? What is constructive feedback?
Let them know what they're doing wrong and how to fix it if they're doing something wrong.
Okay? Why do we do it?
So you also let them know they're doing good too. It doesn't have to just be negative.
Okay, so that might be a different kind of feedback. That's feedback. So when we're giving constructive feedback, we've missed the mark somewhere. We had an expectation or a standard we didn't meet. We've got some opportunity areas there. But we can let them know within that, did they fail the entire thing, or did they get some parts of it right? Because they may have hit some of the things, but not all of them.
You're also identifying what training needs, resources, anything they need. If you've said consistently, hey, I want you to do a pre-flight in 20 minutes, and they're
30, 35, 30, 38, where are we going wrong here? Well, I actually don't know what I'm looking at. Well, that's a problem. So let's go back to basics and go look at your checklist, or let's go out to the plane and show me what I can show you.
Okay? So you're gonna ask them some questions. What are the things you're gonna ask them without anyone looking at your books? I know you got all this information in these books and it's real easy to go to those. But what I want you to do is want you to think for yourself. What are things you're going to ask them in this counseling session?
You can ask them what do they feel their deficits are and kind of get their perspective, because what they perceive may not quite be on the mark.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think probably the first thing you ask them, you like, if you think they're not doing very well, you can say, how do you think you're doing? How do you think you're doing here? You think you're having issues anywhere, And you get feedback from them, and if your opinion differently, you can explain to them what you see and where they can improve.
Okay.
What can I do better to help you?
How many of us think of that perspective? What can I, as your supervisor, do to help you be successful? Because we might not be giving them clear instruction or information.
See if they can adequately train too.
Some folks are not adequately trained, so you need to dig into that. Are you doing that initial evaluation of what they came in with? You get somebody from another base that's a 5 level, you assuming that they really know that, or did you verify that they know that? Maybe they had a deficit wherever they were, or maybe they've been out of that part of the career field. Some of you guys have, I think about the 2 T2s. My son's a 2 T2, and when he first got into the unit in 2006, he was in ramp. Hasn't worked ramp in years. If he went back into there, would he remember everything? So you got to look at some of those things. So those are really good points. So when you do this conversation, you've sat down with the airman, you've had this conversation, you've gotten down to what's going on. How do you close that conversation?
With
Set
solutions.
some goals.
Goals, solutions, on a positive note. Would you guys say that's all a good way to do it? I like to call it the Oreo effect, right? So we give them some good. Hey, you did these things really good. Then I'm going to give you the white cream in the middle. And these are where we kind of failed. But I'm going to close it on a positive. Okay, so the Oreo sandwich cookie method of good, this is what we could do better, and then good. So we end that on a positive with the solution. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. We want to definitely be there to help them. That's important. So we're always going to summarize. Make sure that we know where this conversation was and go forward. Group feedback. When would you use group feedback? And I'm not saying this is positive or negative, but when would you use group feedback? Because if you're counseling an individual, how should you do that?
One-on-one.
One-on-one. Where should you do that?
In a private area.
Okay, preferably someplace private. And when should you do that?
When needed.
When needed. Okay, so there has been a situation, you're calling me in your office. Has it been 2 hours? Has it been 2 weeks? Has it been 2 months? When should you be doing that?
You should address
Sooner
it
the
when
better,
it
yeah.
happens.
As soon as possible. I thought you meant like at 6 months.
Like you have an LLC waiting for you.
Yeah, just whenever you need to.
Okay.
As soon as it happens, if an incident happens, then you go right away. But if nothing happens, then every 6 months.
Right, but if I have to do constructive
Yeah.
if I have to do constructive feedback with you, if you do that 2 months after I had the failure, how effective is that going to be?
Not very.
I don't even remember that. I can't tell you what went wrong because I don't have a clue. I don't remember, right? So as close to the time as possible. What about when I think time, what should be going on in your calendar when you're going to sit down with me?
What you're gonna need to actually do the feedback, organizing, like your thoughts on the matter, the data that you have based off of it, all the materials you're gonna need to actually give them that they need to improve their situation.
Okay, you better have done your homework. You need to know. You need to have done your research. And should you be distracted by anything? Okay, so we're not on the phone. We don't have somebody else waiting to see us that we're looking up constantly. We're checking the clock. You need to make sure you've set aside the right amount of time, right? The person should also have a pretty good idea that what they're coming in to see you about. Okay, so group feedback though, you can do that if it's positive. Can you do that publicly? Okay, so when would you use that?
We do it before and after, like we do missions and stuff.
Okay,
So we have a group, like just like a pre-brief, and then after everything's all done, we'll have a group session, see how we improve, what mission, what mistakes we made, stuff like that, as a group.
okay, so you may touch on some negatives also in that group because the entire group was affected. When are some other times when you might do positive or negative feedback as a group?
You could do it like if there's some morale issues within multiple, when it's not just like maybe one or two people, but like within a group in general. You could kind of do some morale boost.
Okay, try to help morale a little bit.
After it being
That happens. DUI, sexual assaults, suicide attempts, or successes, you tend to see a little bit more of that group. When you think group feedback, what happens after an inspection? Who are our inspectors in the room? Anybody inspecting? Anyone been on an inspection team? So you go out and you do an inspection. What do you do afterwards?
Bring them together, point out things that they could fix, what they did wrong, and what they can do to fix it. I mean,
Okay. That's group feedback, right? You're telling them these are the things that you guys did really good, these are the things that you missed on, and this is how you could fix it, and hey, we're here to help. Right?
just tell them to
We
burn the
never
building down and
believe
try
that.
again.
We're here to help. Okay? So really important stuff, and you're always still going to finish with the positive. Why are we always finishing with the positive?
Because that's what you want them to remember. Like, I mean, of course, the bad, but you want them to feel kind of important and still not just down.
You want them to think the only thing that they've done is something wrong.
Yeah, like if you don't want to just beat somebody up and they walk off with their head down, you like, you want them to think, well, no, we done some good stuff, but we got areas we can work on,
Absolutely. There's going to come a point where you maybe don't do that, but in the beginning stages, is it always going to be that way though? Are you sometimes, maybe you might have some cases where you have somebody that you cannot end on a positive, so keep that in the back of your head. So when we do these sessions, should we document them, yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
All of them, anytime I counsel somebody?
At least a memo for record.
Okay, why?
What, like,
Because if something happens later on, you have a trail.
yeah, and also as a supervisor, sometimes I've been told to get somebody an LOC, by my supervisor, and I personally probably wouldn't give them an LOC for it, and then, sometimes they told me I'm just counting you, but, it's just for record in case we have any further issues, and we'll just document that we talked, And that's pretty much our LOC is, it's documenting that we talk, and it's also to cover your own butt, because things get really serious with this guy, and then your boss, your supervisor would be like, well, if you knew this problem existed, and you weren't attending to the problem, and you're like, oh yeah, I talked to him, and then he might be like, you didn't talk to me,
Didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Why else is it important to document? Why else would you want to document that conversation?
You don't document it, it didn't happen, period.
Okay, it didn't happen, but there's even another reason that you want to document a conversation. Does anyone think of another reason?
To go back and refer to it, or like reference appears if you need to.
History. Yeah, it helps you remember too what you necessarily talked to this specific individual about.
Right. This is our agreement, right? So if you and I, or Sergeant Turner is counseling me, and we've agreed that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, then when he talks to me next, he can say, hey, how's it going on X? Where are you at on that? This was the timeline that we agreed to. Where are you at? Okay, it gives you something to use in following up. It's kind of important. Okay, can you pick out the substandard performers where you are? So what have you done with those substandard performers if you supervise them? What was that?
She said maybe it's a different shop.
That seems to be the standard
All
answer.
too often, we move them to another wing or another section, right? We just keep moving the bad penny. We move that bad penny ready and hoping that somebody else will fix it because we don't want to. And unfortunately and sadly, that tends to be true more often than we like to say. But if you recognize somebody's substandard performance, what about all the other airmen you have working with you or around you?
They're gonna see
They
it
probably
too.
see it too.
They're gonna learn from it, they're like, ooh, I wanna be that guy.
Depending.
Well, it depends, because they could look at it and be like, he's not getting in trouble for any of it, so why am I doing all of this?
Get in trouble, man, he gone.
It depends. Again, like she said, if they're not though, what have you just taught?
You don't wanna be
What
that
have
guy.
you taught
That
them?
behavior
Okay.
is acceptable.
Substandard behavior is perfectly acceptable with you. It's fine. So, and then formal feedback. How do you feel about formal? So we have formal and informal feedback. How do you feel about formal feedback? It's important. Okay, what is formal feedback? Could be the midterm, the ACA, the feedbacks that you have to do and
Just
actually
initial feedback.
attach to your EPRs now. You guys are aware of that, right? Okay, so you might ought to make sure you're doing your ACAs.
I
And
think
we'll
it's
talk more
necessary.
about that later.
They have to talk the first part.
Yes, yes, that is it.
We're gonna talk about that in depth.
Yes, we are gonna talk about that in depth. What else is a formal feedback tool?
The initial feedback that you get, that could be in there for a few months, you're supposed to have.
Okay, those are formal feedbacks. What else? EPR. EPR is formal feedback. Okay? We have a whole new system in that too. Everybody has heard by now, yes? Yes? You guys don't look very happy about that new process?
I have EPR too, but I can't speak to my troop that's deployed, so my supervisor hasn't had it.
Is your supervisor deployed with him?
So. No. We can't speak to our people.
You can't speak to him.
No.
Wow. Okay. So what do we usually hear about the EPR process?
Nothing good.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's broke. Why is it broke?
Everybody gets fives.
If you don't get a 5, you're not a airman.
And you end up writing your own.
You end up writing your own. You should contribute,
Yes.
because your supervisor can't always give it all, but
It's kind of like they said, the stigma of having a 5, where a 5 in an APR, if you read it, a 5 is the person that like shines. He's got like a golden aura of awesomeness behind
the
him. and
angels
every kind of thing.
sing,
Yeah,
a
like,
rainbow
that's
comes
what a
out when
5
they
is
walk in
supposed
the
to be.
room.
But these days, a 5 is the standard.
That's the reason why when they went to a 5 system, like she was saying, because it was supposed to eliminate that.
That's what.
Yeah.
And hopefully this new system is supposed to eliminate that as well.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, what you'll end up seeing is where there will be a certain percentage that have to be in every category. So it's upon us to do the right thing. Have you all went through the briefing on the new enlisted evaluation system?
Yeah, they meet up like one meeting you get done with. They met up like 3 or 4 times, starting with stack of staffs. We meet on
Yes,
the-
active duty does that, but we are not. We are not saying that there's quotas, but the expectation in every wing is that basically you start in the middle. So you start in the middle, and that's good, because that means everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, right? Then you have to be able to justify why you go down or you go up, and it should be very few. So when you read the wording on the new form, it is very specific to few do this, or do you see what I'm saying? So it's really important that if you have not gone through this briefing in your wing, or if you've not done it within your unit, however you guys are doing it, we did it like we've done like I can't even tell you how many presentations we've done on the new EES within our wing, because the wing commander is very serious about getting this right. So make sure that there's been tons of PowerPoint sent out. Every time they redo something, they send out a new PowerPoint on it. Make sure you're getting engaged and understanding how this is supposed to work, because it should not be everybody is a Firewall 5. If I'm a scumbag airman, and Sergeant Hollis is the absolute, I mean, like, he's saving people and, you know, keeping planes from crashing, and he's doing all kinds of amazing work, but we both get 5s, what does that tell him?
I'm about to become you.
I'm about to become you.
I'm about to lay back too if I can work it that way.
Yep,
Why not?
man, I
I'd be
come in
ready
and
to
collect
train.
that check every month. I don't do anything.
General Welsh just gave a presentation the other day that actually I sat in on about the EPR system.
Okay, and was his message?
His message ultimately is about job performance. It's not about volunteering anymore. It's not about any of that. It's about what you can do at your job.
Ding, ding.
It's about getting rid of that. And that's the problem.
That's good, because we used to have a guy that used to volunteer all the time.
And he got firewall
He was
five.
shined on because like he did a lot of volunteer work, but he was a horrible worker.
It's absolutely about the job. Very few lines. Did they talk about how many lines? I mean, they've reduced the number of lines in there. You cannot get wing commander endorsement unless you are one of the top rated people. There's all kinds of stuff put into it. Was there any other takeaways that you got from that?
Well, the takeaways that I got from it, more or less, it was that the part that I seen was the volunteering. And you know, there's still going to be educational goals in there that have to be met if you want to be there. But you know, he talked about if you're going to volunteer your time with your family because of the deployment rates that are about to happen and everything else. So it really focused on the volunteering and getting rid of what we were talking about earlier. So
It's about job performance. How are you doing in your job? Because we need you out there fueling aircraft. We need you out there making sure that planes don't have cracks in them. We need you out there making sure that our people have all of this stuff set up in the system so that when they deploy, their dependents are taken care of in DEERs. We need those things, right? So if we're not focused on that, but we're focused on going downtown and volunteering for everything under the sun, we're missing the mark. And that's one of the big takeaways there. So really get engaged in that. Awards. What's the purpose of awards?
Recognize excellent performance.
Okay.
Just say, hey, you did a great job. Thank you.
I think it does boost morale and it gives people, you know, an incentive to do good, but it also basically is like the opposite of your LOCs, LORs. You also need to show justification on why you're giving this person a good rating. You know, if you try to submit a 3 EPR, they're going to ask you for how much paperwork this guy got, you know, and if you're like, well, I don't have any, didn't write it down or whatever, then they're going to push that
Well,
back.
remember, under the new system, a 3 EPR, 3 EPR is perfectly fine.
you don't
Perfectly
need to submit-
fine.
you
Not
don't
on
need to
the old
submit
one.
paperwork.
Not on the old one, but when they stratified master sergeants in our wing, there were people that had 3s and 4s that were stratified and got a wing commander endorsement because it was about the job. It was not about all of the other things. It's very important that we get that mindset right now because you guys are going to be the ones that change this. It's not going to be the old farts like me because you know how hard it is to change somebody as they get older. You're going to make the change. So it's very important you wrap your arms around that. So when you were talking about awards, we're talking about awards and decorations. So when I'm talking about awards, what are some of the awards that you can give to people? Okay, so that's a decoration. Achievement medal, meritorious service medal,
NCO of the quarter.
common, okay, so awards, NCO of the quarter, NCO of the year, what else?
Depending on your job, like for us being POL, we have what we call pumper and run of the month. Pumper of the month is the person that pumped the most gallons for the month. Run of the month is the person that took the most runs, issuance for aircraft or equipment, what have you.
Okay, so we have some very AFSC specific ones. Do you guys have AFSC specific awards? Okay, what are some other ones? Okay. What are some specific AFSC related things that you do within yours?
DCC recorder and stuff like that for us.
Maintenance professional of the year, maintenance professional.
Okay, so there's some awards that you can compete for that are not only within your wing, but you can go all the way up to AFRC in terms of, you know, like we have some logistics readiness ones, so we can get the Thomas Garrity Award, different things of that nature. Within the aerial port, there's some specific ones too that they can win.
The transportation person of the year, there's a land speed cycle award.
So there's several different things out there that you can look at, and those are important. What happens if you go, hey, this month I'm going to make you the NCO of the month, and next month you're going to be, and the next month you're going to be, and so we got the whole year covered.
it's not gonna change the system, it's gonna be the same. Everything has a similar resume.
It removes the need for it trying to actually excel. Now it's just an expectation. Oh, I'm just going to get it. Well, now I'm not going to have to try anymore. It's just, it's given to me. They expect it now. It removes the whole purpose of it in the first place.
Creates a lot of frustration. Matter of fact, we do that on the civilian side. Civilian documents. This month you get it, that month you get it, this quarter. It's a lot of frustration because it's, like you said, what do I need to do anything extra for when I just know this quarter? You know?
It's my turn.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Who should be getting these awards?
me.
People that deserve it.
And what are you doing to deserve them?
They've worked hard, they've outperformed other people.
Right, they excelled, they outperformed other people, they're the best, the brightest. They stood out. They're taking a leadership role. There's different things that we can do. And in these cases, we look at the whole airman. So this is where we bring in that community involvement. Because when we talk about the whole airman concept, we still want people involved. We just want them to do things that are important to them. Not because it's going to look good on their EPR. Yes, they can go as a part of their awards nomination, but because these are things that are near and dear to their hearts. You know, so if you volunteer your time in something that matters to you. It's another thing that Sergeant D and I were talking about, you know, in the last 24 hours or so, is just those things that you really feel passionately about. I feel passionately about working out and triathlons and duathlons and running and all that sort of stuff. So I work with kids out of the Boys and Girls Club, coaching refugees and immigrant children and at-risk youth in the middle school in the sport of triathlon. I don't do tries, I do duathlons. I'm not a strong swimmer, but my husband coaches their swimming and he is a strong swimmer. So this is a part of, we run out of Boys and Girls Club. So do things that you feel passionately about. Maybe you can bring your family into it. That way you spend time with your family. You teach your kids those values. Those are important. Decorations, we talked about all the different types that you can get.